Great. Wonderful. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Oh, wow, there's a big clock up here. Okay, we're on the clock. Hello, everyone, again. I am going to kick us off for this next session with Indu Navar. As I mentioned this morning, we are launching an Open Science Data Challenge in March of 2023, and I need the clicker here. All right. And so what we wanted to do this morning is talk about what RareX is planning on doing in terms of this Open Science Data Challenge and talk about what our challenge is. And so that's why we've invited Indu to talk with us about a challenge that she drove around ALS and use it as a case study for what a challenge can really bring in terms of data and insights, and also in terms of motivating a research community. So before we get started, I was wanting to ask Indu to introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Indu Navar. I'm a technologist by training or education. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I was one of the founding team of what is today WebMD, which was called Healthion when we first started, and built companies in different verticals like manufacturing. And my husband was at Amazon for about 18 years, built Amazon Cloud and many other innovations. My journey came into this orphan disease or rare disease was he got diagnosed with ALS, and he passed away in 2019. So just seeing how, as most of us have been affected by it when we least expect it. We went through diagnosis, which took us about a little over 2.5 years, and where pretty much, I think 80% of the motor neuron was already damaged by the time we got diagnosed. And the whole process of diagnosis and also after was definitely shocking as to how backwards we are, how behind we are in bringing innovations that we enjoy in our daily lives. And as technologists, what we've built in other verticals have not really penetrated in healthcare, which was shocking. And that was my journey into starting Peter Cohen Foundation in honoring my husband, which we function as Everything ALS.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do to start things out is share a little bit about the RareX Open Science Data Challenge, and then I'll turn it over to Indu to talk about the ALS Kaggle Challenge. So why are we doing this? And so I'll start there. And as I said this morning, just because you build it doesn't mean they will come. And so we're launching the RareX data analytics platform at the end of this month. And this is a huge milestone for us and for this community in terms of being able to get this data out to researchers in an open and responsible way. And this data challenge is intended to really generate interest and excitement around the data set that we're generating. And I think that one of the things that got me very excited about this, and I have to thank our collaborators at Roche who really have spent a lot of time educating us on what these challenges are and why they're important from a community standpoint. And there's a lot of words on this slide, but I think that one of the key things that I want to draw your attention to is that one of our core values is around open and collaborative sharing, and that is absolutely what these challenges are about, is really building collaboration and building even dynamic teams within these collaborative challenges. And so what we're doing in March is we are launching a challenge that is going to be focused on neuro, pan-neuro, with a specific focus on pediatric neurodevelopmental disorders. And some of the key questions question categories that we have started to develop, you can see listed here. One of them is around, is it possible to shorten the diagnostic odyssey with better phenotype information to power diagnosis? A second question category is, can we identify previously unrecognized phenotypes within patient populations? And I think that all of us as patients and patient advocates, within communities, there's often these anecdotal pieces of information or threads on Facebook, but bringing those into data sets then can be mined so that we can identify those is really important. And then a third area is around being able to generate insights cross disorder to really accelerate therapeutic research. So, we're still in the early stages of developing these question categories, but I think that they're going to be very, very exciting, especially given the data set that we'll be putting forward. And from a call to action standpoint, and we'll reiterate this at the end, we are really hoping that our patient communities will let your researchers know about this. And I want to emphasize that you are researchers. So, we are all in kind of the spirit of what we've been talking about today of, energizing, activating, generating research. We're really looking to make this challenge also accessible, to people who don't have an AI background, but, bring other pieces to the table in terms of being able to drive analysis. And so encourage you to participate as well. I just want to highlight some of the data sets that are, we're going to have as part of this challenge. And so you can see that there are 3 data sets here. And I'm going to start actually with data set number 2 at the bottom, which is our, the general patient data set, patient participant data set for neurodev disorders. And we're really excited, as I mentioned earlier, we have 40 communities on the platform. About 70% of those are neurodev disorders. So it should be a really nice, robust cross-disorder data set of patient-reported outcomes. And then moving up to the left, this is the, we're calling it small but deep, cross-disorder data set that we're generating, in conjunction with the Commission for CNVs, the team that's going to talk in a few minutes, as well as Colorado Children's. And then the third data set is in collaboration with our partners at Simons. And so, we're really excited that Wendy, and I can't quite see her, but Jennifer Chernagle and their team, we are working on the process of being able to also integrate that data set into this challenge to really create a very rich set of patient-reported as well as clinical outcome data. And so this just gives you a little bit more detail in terms of data sets number 1 and 2, and the disorders that are part of the data set. So I'm going to stop here and switch over and give Indu the floor and the clicker.
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to, when I started Everything ALS, I was inspired by my attendance in Global Genes Conference in 2019. That was my first conference. My husband had just passed away. It was 5 weeks, and I just got invited, and that changed my life because I met a lot of you guys. And, I said, I know what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do for the disease that I know so much about now. And I am really, 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 as many people said, pissed off about how we don't have the things that we should. So if I'm that pissed off, this is what I need to do. And I think a few months later, when Nicole called me and asked me if I could be on the board of Global Genes, I jumped at it because I said, whatever we're going to do this, we're going to replicate it for other diseases. And that's my intent, is how do we do what I'm doing and how do we replicate it? So with that in mind, one of the things that, as Christine said here, is data sets, right? I mean, so I looked at the data sets in ALS. We had some data sets, small, transcriptomics data and whole genome genomics data. And over 3 years, less than 200 people have used it. And there was more than $40 million have been put together to generate this. And the first thing that I said was, how come it's sitting in the small database by some postdocs who are pulling it, and we really don't know what's happening? And we said, can we do something? I come from software background where we have open source, we have people working on it. I said, first thing we'll do is why don't we just expose it, and how are we going to do it? So this is the kind of little bit of a story of how we came about it. And now that we have kind of know what it is, we're going to do rinse and repeat so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we formed a team, and first is that people had a lot of doubt. Oh, it's not the right data set, or it's a really small data set. We heard that over and over again. So I called up a friend of mine in Roche, and I've known her for 15 years, and I said, hey, what do you guys do? There was COVID just happening. Everybody wants to know, they're doing challenges in COVID, and you don't know anything about COVID, right? And she said, well, let me introduce you to the group that actually did the COVID Kaggle challenge. And we went exactly the same thing. We didn't know, and we discovered more data, and the more data we got, the more we were able to. So we took that approach. We took the approach of what Roche did at COVID time. So it's the Roche AI Center of Excellence and Answer ALS. That's where the data came from. And Everything ALS, our organization, and a few others that Roche brought in. So this was the team. So we set out, and it was a disparate team. As you can see, the data set was about 134 people with ALS, motor neuron disease, and about 30 healthy control. And we got genomics, transcriptomics, and clinical data. And a little bit about what we do at Everything ALS. What we are hyper focused on is really bringing digital biomarkers. I think I heard a few of the panelists today talk about measuring the progression when there is fine motor or gross motor. So in ALS, we do have gross motor, fine motor, and breathing and bulbar function issues, but we really use the self-reported outcome that is 0 to 4, tell me how you're doing, which is plagued with junk. And so what we're doing is we're really bringing in sensors to really do objective measurements as opposed to going in through the subjective measurement. So what I did to do that was I created a patient community, which is ALS patient community. From that, we do our own IRB approved research, and we collect the data, and that data is distributed to many researchers. And this is kind of the block diagram of how it looks like. So we practice citizen-driven research with open innovation. So that data is really now distributed to many researchers, AI community, academics, and pharma companies as well. And we work with many AI startups. So we don't have to come up with the sensors. We use the sensors that's already available, and we've kind of created the same methodology as in software, where there is very quick go, no go, and a 30-day trial, and if it works, then we move forward. So we've done this we've successfully done a bulbar that is swallowing speech and all the functions using, so we record both videos and audios of patients, so we have the data where it looks really good. We're in talks with regulators on how to make this a secondary biomarker, and now we're kicking off a study in gross motor, that is sensor in the shoes, and also fine motor and breathing. So this is how it looks like. What we're doing is unlocking the traditional studies, which is slow and expensive, to being more efficient. So that once we collect the data, we get to distribute to many researchers simultaneously, which is cost effective and also faster. Great. So I know you had a lot of questions on Kaggle, so how we came about it.
Yeah, and so I'm interested in understanding what your motivation was for the challenge? Like, what did you think that from an everything ALS standpoint, from an advocacy standpoint, you were going to be able to, drive in terms of running this challenge?
Again, it goes back to a lot of just data sits there. First of all, it's hard to get the data. It gets locked. And when you would have it, it's kind of, it's just not really utilized by the right people. And when we do the challenge, it's a community comes together. They're building on top of each other. They're exchanging ideas. And I think that was really missing when I saw the data set that was getting pulled, and it's kind of, we have no idea what happens. There was no feedback loop. We were not building on top of each other's learning.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about, I think it was 134 patients in the data set. And yesterday there was a panel on big data, and I think Kazi talked about MDOS, so meaningful data at scale. And I'm curious about your thoughts in terms of applying that concept to these 134 patients, and what was the, in terms of the insights that were generated, what was the most interesting insight for you, and how is it driving forward research now?
Yeah, so great question. So we asked about 3 questions in our Kaggle challenge. One is, can people see the difference between slow progressing and fast progressing? Because ALS is multivariant, and it's really hard to figure out how people progress. So that's one question. And the second one is onset. So we have different onsets. Major is sometimes limb onset. That's about 60%, and 40% is, or probably 30% is bulbar. That is the vocal speech area. So we asked if you can actually distinguish between, from the data set, bulbar onset and limb onset. And the third was kind of the open-ended question. Can you really figure out some gene that actually stands out, that actually is implicated between in the ALS patients that you don't see in the controls? We got about 10,000 downloads in 2 weeks. 2 months, in 60 days, all over the world. We saw a lot of activity in India, Japan, a lot of Asian countries. And I wanted to tell you that 80% of the people said that they had not known what ALS is, or they had not. But what we did really well, I think, is showing them the stories of people. We actually educated people about what ALS is, and we had some patients record their journey of who they were, and we got some more techie people who have been infected with the disease to say, so the stories really, we saw some comments back from some of the AI community who actually worked on it, that they really wanted to do something meaningful, and they felt like this was very meaningful. And so I think that really would drive them to be part of it. And out of the 10,000, this was a detailed, answers we asked them to give us. They had to give us models, they had to give us the code, they needed to, answer. We got about 51 responses, and definitely more surprising than we thought we would get. And it was really hard to figure out who is the winner, because it was such good, output. And so we wanted to select one winner, but we landed up selecting 3 winners and 3 sub-winners. So because the thing is, what we said is we haven't solved this disease. Why are we actually just saying, oh, these are winners, and not recognizing the rest of the people? So we kind of got the top 6 people and said, can we keep working with you? Can we keep, working with you to take it to the next level from what you found? So what we figured was, this is not going to be an answer. This was our first Kaggle challenge. The output we got was motivated people on the table now. The motivated group of people who are now educated more about the disease and want to do more. And we had one gentleman from Illumina And he's a master Kaggler. He's in a lot of the Kaggle competition. He didn't know about ALS, but he got so into it, and he even brought Illumina into talking to us about how do they donate more whole genome sequencing so we could get more data. So it really, it takes shape in places. And also I keep remembering, who invented airplane. It was Wright brothers. It wasn't like some big company, right? We really think the answer is going to come from some place which you never expected. So we want to keep on looking at that needle in the haystack, kind of put it out there. So our goal is to really look at, more and more people out there. And like I said, the surprising thing that came out of it is this gentleman wanted Illumina to work with us and generate more data, and is very motivated, and somebody who did not know what ALS was and was not in our community 60 days prior.
There's a lot of wonderful lessons from what you just shared, and also this point around a challenge is not an endpoint, right? It's really actually the beginning of many relationships and the acceleration of research. And so thank you for sharing that. I know we're running out of time, but maybe I can just make a couple of ending comments. So we're taking these lessons, and the lessons from many partners, especially from Roche and AAIH. So thank you for your input into your experience and input into this challenge. Call to action for this group. Get your researchers motivated and interested in participating. And I think that one of the things that Indu has shared today that's exciting for me is that this isn't the end point. It's really this opening where we can bring in many new researchers who, I think that one of the research groups that was involved in your challenge, they were from the retail industry, if I remember correctly. And had really nothing to do with healthcare, and now are excited about starting to work in healthcare. And so we can really expand our research community through this type of methodology. And the plan also, so you are aware, is that we will be doing this on an annual basis. And so, as our data set grows, the disorders that we're able to bring in expands, we'll be able to really expand the opportunities in the challenge. So a lot of exciting stuff happening in March, and thank you so much, Indu.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have time for just a couple questions because I don't want to take away from it. So just to reiterate, I think, the dream has always been, what could happen, right, if we could really, create an environment that brings together all this data and opens it up so that we heard last night from those in the AI community and create this ecosystem of data so that the magic can happen. We've seen so much passion and intelligence and amazingness coming from people who are dedicating themselves to lean in and create change and do things differently and think outside the box. And so this type of open science, is something that, 5 years ago people weren't really talking about. And so it is the future, and it's what drives change and helps with acceleration. And so, we with our partners and our friends and our community want to ensure that we can provide that environment to help, create and at least support some of that change in the future that we know is just going to be so game changing. So is there any questions for Indu about what she's developed and created? And I know that you're going to be hanging out for a while, right? So we can also grab her
question
after.
over there.
Yes, okay.
Sorry, I keep asking all these questions, but you guys are great. I love that you all are taking an approach that is looking across all diseases as you're developing your ability to curate data and bring data together. And I noticed in your challenge, one of the things you all did effectively was you asked a question that was important to the disease community. Is there a way to scale that to scale asking the right questions across all the different disease communities and sort of surfacing what's the most important question that we can ask for each of these disease communities with the data that we're collecting in rare
Very good question, because I wanted to answer that. So what we learned was, when you ask those detailed questions, we don't know how to validate it. We don't have enough data sets to run. So we were kind of, but we're doing Kaggle 2.0. We're actually working on putting that out very soon. And with this, we've learned that it needs to be very simple. We've got now 300 data sets, so we're going to give 200 for training the model. That is some controls and some people with ALS. And the simple is that we're going to give another 100 data set. Only we know who's got ALS and who's control. And the question is, can you actually distinguish between controls and ALS? So even if we want to see how the model works, to see what the difference between just the controls and the disease. I would say if you have to ask a question, I would simply ask that question. Can you actually see the difference? I mean, especially in ALS where there's a multivariant genetic component. So I think I like this because we know the answer, so we'll be able to figure out, what the models come up and how accurate or how close to accuracy it is.
So I think that one of the things that you're pointing to is that it's an iterative process, right? So, in Kaggle, this ALS Kaggle Challenge version 1, there were learnings that now can be, moved into the next challenge, both from an insight standpoint and a how to ask the question standpoint. And going back to your question about how can we scale this kind of across disorders, a few things that we've learned through this process is that there are different kinds of questions we can answer or ask at different points. So we have a relatively new data set right now that isn't well characterized, because the data has all been generated in the last year, and most of it in the last 6 months, and the next 6 months before the challenge. And so the questions that we're asking this time are going to be very open-ended to allow for exploration of the data. And that's very different from a machine learning, like a very traditional kind of machine learning challenge where there's a known truth set, and we're seeing how close people are getting to that truth set, which is I think what you're talking about in your upcoming challenge. And so I think that there's going to be an iteration and a growth process of the types of questions that we can ask, and then on how communities can get involved with the questions. I think that's a great point, and you may have just nominated yourself onto the planning committee, so congratulations. We'll be following up with you after. But I think that what we want to do is really be able to crowdsource those questions in the planning process, so that we can get to what is important to communities, because especially as the data sets expand, we will have the ability to ask more specific questions in disease areas that are still broad, and it's important to have, obviously patient input. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Just the last thing I'll say is that, we are, much like this event and much like Open Science Data Challenge, et cetera, it's, we want to continue to bring forward innovative ideas and opportunities for those that we are collaborating with, that are spending time and committing, yourselves and trusting in RAREX as an org. And so, I think one of the hopes here is that, that there's a team and we're continuously, really working to try to bring forward new and new approaches so that we can help you become more successful on your research driving journeys. And so hopefully that's kind of the message today.
And just to add to Nicole, what you said is one of the things about AI communities, they like to solve problems, and I come from that place. And with the research, healthcare, they always go, what is it in for them? Why are they going to do it? I mean, there was a lot of those questions. I'm like, well, because people want to solve problems. And once we put this out there, what we heard from the AI community is, why aren't more people doing this? We want to be doing more meaningful stuff as opposed to, doing challenges that's just meaningless, I mean, like it's really not touching human life. So there was a lot of ask for, why aren't we doing more of this? Why aren't we doing more, disease discovery kind of challenges? So I just wanted to put it out there. There is really hunger on the other side as well. So I think that is going to be a good, good match if we can actually translate it.
Thank you for your leadership and your innovation. All right, thank